Okay, so we are still solving quadratics. This time we're going to find the zeros, which means solving for x if the function equals 0 of the quadratic function. Still finding the zeros are the x-intercepts. And this time we're going to have to do this by grouping, okay? We want to be able to factor things, but we have coefficients in front of x squared this time. So in the previous problems, these ones, the coefficient in front of x squared was 1, makes it a lot easier to factor. So we're going to do this a little differently, okay? And we're going to do this by grouping. All right. So when I factor by grouping, I'm going to write this out as, I know 4 times 12, or I'm sorry, 4 times 3 is 12, okay? Just like that. Just like we did before, we multiply A times C. And I need my factors to add up to B, just like before. Okay, so they add to a positive, or I'm sorry, multiply to a positive, but add to a negative. So I know they're both negative. So -1 and -12, and -2, -6, -3, and -4. So adding to -13 is -1 and 12. So instead of starting my parentheses, because I don't know where this 4 in front of x squared is how it's going to end up in my parentheses. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to write, and I know this is going to equal 0, so 4x squared. Now instead of writing and minus 13x, I know the factors are -1 and 12, so I'm going to have a minus 1x minus 12x and then plus 3. Now I want to be able to cut this in half, okay? Cut my equation in half by grouping. The only problem is you need to make sure that, like, we want that 4x squared to possibly go into one of these, okay? And it doesn't go into, actually, sorry, it doesn't go, don't worry about what I was just saying. Woo! All right, we want to be able to cut this in half, okay? So I group this side, whoa, and I'm erasing, not writing. I want to group this side together, okay? So I have a 4x squared minus 1x. And then on this side, I have a -12x plus 3. Okay? And I didn't really want to write the parentheses. I'm not multiplying at the moment. I just have them separated, and I really wanted to show that, okay? So let's see what we can factor out of this left side. What can go into 4x squared and a minus 1x? Well, in this case, I want to leave x squared positive. So I know I'm factoring out a positive thing, so I keep x squared positive. Well, only x goes into both of these terms. So I'm going to take an x out, and I'm left with 4x minus 1. Okay, I divided 4x squared and a minus 1x by x, and I get this. Now, on this other side, I need to factor something out of a -12x and a plus 3, okay? But I want my x to be positive, so I'm going to factor out a negative. Okay, if I divide -12x by a negative, I'm going to get a positive. And then what goes into 12 and 3? Well, 3 goes into both of those. So if I divide -12x by a -3, I get 4x. And if I divide a positive 3 by a -3, I get -1. If you look, our parentheses are the same. Okay, so I'm going to write the parentheses. I have a 4x minus 1. So if we kind of ignore those, I'm factoring it out of the whole thing, basically. I'm left with an x minus 3. So that's in my other equation. Okay, I factored out an 4x minus 1 out of everything. And it leaves me with x minus 3. Okay, and again, this still equals 0. So I'm left with two equations. I have 4x minus 1 equals 0. Remember, that's that zero product property. And an x minus 3 equals 0. And I solve for x. So over here, I'm going to add 1. So I have 4x equals 1. To get x by itself, divide by 4. So when I'm solving for x, I get a 1/4. And here I have to add 3. X equals a positive 3. Which you might have been able to see that one without doing this part, because it's just grouped with x, just x and a number, and you take the opposite sign, and you get that. Now, it would not have mattered if I would have put negative 12x and then minus 1. Your factors, when you got to this step, would have ended up being the same. Okay, and I can show you that real quick. I'm going to actually move this way and show you that real quick. If I would have put 4x squared minus 12x minus 1x plus 3, okay, when I factor these two things, 4 goes into both, and so does x. So I'd get x minus 3. And then over here, negative, looks like just negative 1, because negative 1x and a positive 3, nothing really goes into them. So I'm really just taking that negative out of the x there. So I'm left with x and then a minus 3. So notice these are the same. So I know I'm going to have an x minus 3. When I factor that out, I'm left with a 4x minus 1. Okay, so it doesn't matter the order you put those in when grouping, you get the same parentheses. Okay? All right, so let's move on and do number 11 here. Just going to draw my line there. All right, I want to multiply A and C together. So if I do that, I'm going to get 24. And I want the factors of 24 that add up to a negative 11. So they multiply to positive, add to negative, so I know they're both negative. So I have a negative 1 and a negative 24, a negative 2, a negative 12, a negative 3 and a negative 8, and a negative 4 and a negative 6. Okay, there it is right there. Negative 3, negative 8 add up to negative 11. So I'm going to replace that negative 11x with those. So I have 0 equals 2x squared minus 8x minus 3x plus 12. Because I'm just putting these x's with those and just replacing that 11x, that negative 11x. Okay, so my equation stayed the same. I just split that negative 11 into two things. All right, so we're going to draw our line down the middle. Okay, we're going to factor this side. What goes into 2 and 8? Well, a 2 does. And what goes, and what goes into an x squared and x? Well, I can take out 1x. So 2x squared divided by 2x leaves me an x. And I know I'm going to have a minus because I'm taking a negative 8x divided by a positive 2x is going to leave me a negative 4. All right. Now I need to factor the right side. Now x is negative, so I'm going to leave this as a minus here. What goes into 3x and 12? Well, a 3 can go into both of those. So if I divide a negative 3 from a negative 3x, I get x. And a 12 divided by a negative 3x is a negative 4. Here's the same thing, negative 4 and x, or x minus 4 and x minus 4. So I'm going to factor that out, and that leaves me with 2x minus 3. Okay, if you set each of those equal to 0, we already know the opposite of that, so we know 4 is one of our answers. But I need to solve this one. So I add 3 to both sides. 2x equals 3. Divide both sides by 2. So x is going to be a 3/2. All right, go to your practice and do problems 48, 50, 52, and then move on to the next video.